Hello. After trying to demonstrate this no tear folded paper foundation piece technique on Zoom and realizing how difficult it is to not actually be in the room and be able to pick up the pieces of fabric and just place them together in the right orientation, I've tried to come up with a solution that hopefully might work. We shall see anyway. So I've used a free download from Moda Free Patterns. There are no instructions, just this final construction sheet which I've written on. Not sure how well you can see this. I'm going to try to come back so that you get a full view. There we go, we're nearly there. Yes, there we go. So, based on looking at the picture, I've sort of guesstimated which shade of fabric went where. So, W is white, 1 is light, 2 is sort of light medium, 3 is dark medium, 4 is dark. And I shall just leave that there for a few seconds for you to be able to see and just copy. I've numbered it. I originally had done light, medium and dark, but then decided to put a 4th shade in, and that's why I numbered them. So that's the final. That's the final pattern. I'm going to show you. So that's what it should look like when it's complete. Now, if you've tried to film, especially if you're lucky enough to have a sewing machine that has really good lighting, the problem is trying to stitch white paper next to white fabric with a bright light. There's no definition, you just can't see any contrast. So for today, I've replaced the white. Sorry about this wobbly camera, let's see if we can get it steady. I've replaced the white with sky blue, so I'm hoping against the paper you'll be able to see the contrast and perhaps understand where we're going with this technique. So as a rule, when we use, right now, go back, you need to print off 2 sets of the actual stitch templates from the website at 100%. If you just print them off as they're sent, they won't necessarily be the right size or the same size over 2 pieces of paper, if I remember rightly. So please set your printer to custom 100%. Right. So as a rule, when we foundation piece, the cutting template would always be the right way up on the fabric, on the back of the fabric, and the right side of the fabric is always facing away. And this means when we pick it up against the placed piece of fabric, we have 2 fabrics right side together, and we stitch on the wrong side of the fabric, which is there. So I wondered if I reversed the papers and left the paper on the wrong side of the fabric, would it make it easier for the placement for the sewn line, which I hopefully will, as we sew, it will make sense. So what I've used is a glue stick, any glue stick, it doesn't matter. I'm going to leave, right, so I've asked you to print off 2 sets of template. One set we'll cut into the units for sewing, the sewing unit, and the second we're going to cut down into finished sized pieces. So that's A6, a C6, and there we go. That's the finished size. There's no seam allowance whatsoever on that. And every single unit you will cut to the finished size. And what we're going to do, I'm going to glue this onto the fabric. Again, we're gluing to the wrong side of the fabric, and we're gluing the wrong side of the template to the fabric. And when we cut out, we're going to add 1/2 inch all the way round. So this will include the 1/4 inch seam allowance and a little extra for us to line up. I'm just going to turn that a touch. Now just go across there. So I'm going to leave, normally as a rule, that would sit face up on the front of the fabric, but we're going to leave that on the wrong side, the wrong way round. We've reversed it back on the wrong side of the fabric. Once we start sewing, this should make more sense. So once again, it's roughly 1/2 inch. Get the glue stick, just only a small dab. It's just holding it because we're going to take it off. We just need, it's just for placement really. You could use a pin if you want to use pins, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. If you don't want the pin head to get in the way, just use some small sewing needles, perhaps some quilting needles. They're not too large, and there's no head to get in the way when you start cutting. So there's plenty there. I can cut some of that. Sorry about knocking that. I can cut some of this ear off. There we go. That's number 2, and there's one more somewhere. There we go. Last one. It's amazing how tiny these pieces are and how much fabric they seem to take to cut out. But anybody that's done this, has done any of this, will know it is quite wasteful. And this is possibly the least wasteful way to do it. But there you go. That's how it works. I'm going to just cut up there, snip that bit off. Get that out of the way. Turn it around. 1/2 inch. And another 1/2. That's probably nearly 1/2 inch anyway. Oh, it's just a smidge over. So remember, we've got our 1/4 inch seam allowance in there, plus another 1/4 inch just to allow a bit of wiggle room. So now, move that out of the way, fasten the glue. I'm going to start with a smaller unit just so that I can show you how I've marked them. and then hopefully the larger units will make more sense. So there's D2 and there's D1, and I've orientated it so you can see these two seams need to be sewn together on this line. So go to remove the paper from D1 because we start with number 1. If you find that the paper's sticking to the fabric, a hot iron, just sit a hot iron on it and that will dry the glue out and release it. So I'm not too worried about that for this demonstration. So now I'm going to use the glue stick. I'm going to glue. See, I've got plenty of room there. I'm actually going to, that's probably slight, as near to a 1/4 inch that seam will be, I think. There we go. So I'm going to glue that to the fabric, because on this you can see that the seam allowance is there, so all of this is excess now, so we don't need to worry, we've got everything covered. So I'm just going to pop a spot of glue on, and again, if you feel it's more secure, just pop a pin in it. I'm just going to pop a needle in. The pins are fine in the larger units, but these small units, sometimes the quilt pins can be just a little bit too long. So that's why I've used a quilt needle. I'm not going to sew with that needle, but it's really useful as a small pin. And there's no head to rock the ruler when I come to use the ruler. So I'm just going to turn this round so that you can see where we're going. So normally we would place the two seams together and then stitch on that line, but that's not what we're going to do today. We're going to place the two, if I show you this, I'm going to show you this now. So as you can see, I know it's upside down, but it's easier for me to. So there's D1, D2, and you can see that template. If I lay that over what would probably be a 1/4 inch allowance, you can see that everything is, there's more than enough all the way round for me to trim that. And we're not going to have any strange angles when we fold that back. So I know if I pick up this now, edge to edge, I know that once I sew, let me just hold that straight, I am actually going to stitch next. I'm actually going to stitch next to this folded line. I'm not going to stitch on it or into it if I can help it. Not the end of the world if you do. You might just have to reprint some templates. And all the way along I'm going to stitch next to it, and then using the ruler I will trim to a 1/4 inch. But because I can see the template on the opposite piece, I know when I turn that over it will fit. It won't be pointing east or west, it'll just fit. I can't think of anything else apart from what I've done. I'm going to turn this back round. What I did was, the first seam to join, I've just put a little cross. But then on the larger units that have more, what I've done is C1 is to C2. So when you look at the orientation on C2, I'll just get all these pieces for you. So C2 is going to be the last one that I pick up, and it is. So C2 has got I've underlined so that we know that that's the orientation. I've added an A, and then we want C1, and that seam matches that seam, so it's two A seams together. So then when we come to C3, I will have a B to B, and the next one is C4. So C4 is C to C, and so on. So I hope as we sew along, visually it will be easier for you to comprehend, because it is difficult to visualize the mirror image, and this seemed like the simplest way. But what seems like the simplest to me is not necessarily, it can be meaningless. It can mean absolutely nothing to the next person. So we shall give this a go and see how we get on. I'm going to stop the video now, and I will put the materials list back up for you, and then we'll meet again in part 2 for the actual sewing. So here we go. I shall leave that for a few seconds for you to just look at again and see what you think, and I'll see you in part 2.